Hello everyone, and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios. So, I think I've made it more than clear on a number of occasions that Primaris just aren't my thing. However, I like to think of myself as an objective person. I can see the value and I can see the positives in a Primaris model. They are cool looking, they are a nice update for Space Marines. I just find the more classic Marine just more to my taste. Frankly, if they just made the classic Marine a bigger size, then, well, I prefer the old mods of armor more. But this is of course personal preference. And because I can be objective about this, and because these combat patrol boxes are meant to be starter armies for the new budding hobbyist, I figured I'd take a look at each of them and, well, make my own personal opinion on which one is probably the best one. And I feel like this is going to be a good little experiment to essentially value the boxes. As they're all the same price, it's not so much money we're now talking about, we're talking about how adaptive the army can be to multiple chapters, as well as, well, which one's the coolest. And of course, this is all personal opinion, so don't get too bent out of shape if you don't agree with my final choice. If you have seen my previous video about combat patrol boxes, you probably have a good guess on which one I'm going to pick over the others. As the Blood Angel box isn't officially going to be out for pre-order just yet, I figured we'd talk about that one first, as it has the newer artwork and, well, this is the best picture I could find. So, in this box you get an Impulsor, basically transport unit for Primaris, a group of 5 Intercessors, a group of 3 Aggressors, and you get yourself the Scout variant, the Incursors, along with a Librarian as your HQ choice. Now, as a box, it's not too bad. It's not bad at all. You have a transport for your Primaris, which is useful. You've got Aggressors, who can be useful in most situations. And then you have the Incursors. The thing that's weirdly out of place in this box is the Librarian. Now, don't get me wrong, a Blood Angel Librarian is nothing to sniff at, particularly if they do continue to have their own unique psychic powers, but a lot of people prefer using HQ choices that aren't necessarily Librarians, and rather have a HQ who's going to be more of a close combat monster or a tank. So the Librarian is not going to be as popular a choice, but it's not a terrible choice either, as the Librarian can buff other units around him, and, well, it makes a good support character, not necessarily as a frontline war machine. And speaking of frontline, besides the Aggressors, which will receive a lot of incoming fire, the Intercessors will only last so long. And the Incursors, well, yeah, they're not going to last very long either in any close combat situation. But this army is shooty, and the Impulsor does have, some guns. So, as a choice for a first starter army box, it's not bad. Maybe just swap out the Librarian for, say, a captain, like a Primaris captain or something, and this box would have been pretty perfect, but I guess they just wanted to try and spice things up a little bit. So, not a bad box by any stretch of the imagination, but not necessarily the best box for all Space Marine chapters. The Deathwatch box is interesting because it doesn't give you a vehicle. However, you make up for this by having 2 character models. Your Primaris Lieutenant, or Captain, depending on how you decide to use him in-game, as well as an Apothecary, which will always be handy. You have 2 groups of Intercessors, or Deathwatch Intercessors, and a group of 3 Aggressors. This box kind of covers your bases quite well. It misses the central figure of a transport or a vehicle or something along those lines, which does detract it compared to the other boxes. However, as a starting army, it's fairly solid. Will it translate well to other chapters? Well, you're going to have to dump all your lovely silvery shoulders unless you decide to make some kind of lore-friendly reason why your chapter has all the signs of the Inquisition on them, which isn't impossible. But as a starting box army, it's pretty good. You have your close combat, character in the form of the Primaris Lieutenant or Captain. You've got plenty of close combat juice with your Aggressors, and with 2 units of Intercessors, you've got a relatively decent amount of firepower. Nothing too powerful, but at the same time, a handy little mix. And with the apothecary on board, you're going to survive a little while longer, so long as you keep the apothecary out of harm's way, of course. So as a starting box, it's not half bad at all, and depending on if you're happy to dump the silver shoulder pads or not, you still have an army that will translate well to almost any Primaris Space Marine chapter. Honestly, the only chapter I could think of that might not benefit as much from this box set would probably be the more close combat orientated ones like Space Wolves, Templars, or Blood Angels, for example. But for most other chapters, Ultramarines, this has worked perfectly. Salamanders, Imperial Fists. Oh yeah, this box set would quite comfortably translate over to those, no problem. Raven Guard, White Scars. Well, I mean, any White Scar, in my opinion, that's not sat on a bike is not really doing it right, but, to each their own. And now we talk about the box set that I may have been bashing on, the one that I did last week. So, all that aside, and staying objective here, how does this work as a starting army across all Space Marine chapters? Because frankly, even though it's sold as a Space Wolf one, it could translate quite well to a number of different chapters. Obviously, you'd have to ditch the Space Wolf upgrade kit. However, I could see this box set working really, really well for any chapter. Now I think about it, Iron Hands are the first thing in my mind, but that could just be because of the Invicta Warsuit, which, whilst I have many disagreements with why this thing is valid from a lore sense, I can't deny that the model looks pretty decent. I would prefer a more armoured canopy, If you're going to have a mech and you're wandering around like a Space Marine inside this thing, you might as well have an armoured cockpit. And the Reavers, whilst not really the greatest option right now for close combat because they're a little bit too squishy, and really knives and pistols only go so far when what you really need are power fists and power weapons. Yeah, the box set actually could be very handy across multiple chapters. As I've said, Iron Hands, Ultramarines, Blood Angels. Hell, this box set might even be better for Blood Angels than the other box. But you can have Raven Guard, you can have your Imperial Fists, you can have any chapter would actually fit quite well. And that's simply because you've got a fairly well-rounded box here. You've got the Invicta Warsuit, which makes a nice central model. You've got two groups of intercessors, which will always do well, because that's your core choices sorted. Battle line, sorry. Mixing my Age of Sigmar with 40k now. And you've got the character in the shape of a Primaris Lieutenant, or, Captain, or Wolflord, whatever you decide. And the Reavers can, just run around and do stuff. Honestly, it's probably best, if you can, to sell the Reavers, or maybe convert them into something else. Perhaps assault intercessors, Maybe do something like that. Make some customized assault intercessors. That would work quite well. But as a box set, and keeping my prejudices aside, it's a pretty decent box set. I don't have many complaints on it from a all Space Marine chapter encompassing viewpoint. So now that you've heard me waffle on for about 10 minutes, maybe less, which box set is better for the first time hobbyist? And if you're committed to doing a Primaris Space Marine chapter, which one would I go for? Well, if what you're choosing is to do the Space Marine chapter that the box is being sold as, personally I would probably go for the Deathwatch or the Blood Angel one, primarily because the Blood Angel, whilst you do have a little bit of an iffy time with the Librarian, having that transport is very useful because you're going to end up needing them in the future. And, your intercessors and aggressors will always be handy, and you can find a use for the incursors. They're definitely more useful than the Reavers at any rate for the Space Wolf box, but if I was choosing it purely as a Space Marine player, and I didn't care what the artwork on the box said, I just wanted the models inside, then it would have to be between Deathwatch or Space Wolves, because the Space Wolves give you that all-important 2 groups of 5 intercessors, which form your battle line, which really, really helps, especially for a starting army. And then it comes down to whether I prefer characters or a more central model. And, well, honestly, I'm not a fan of the Invicta Warsuit, as I previously said. So, actually, I would have to say, for a starting Space Marine player who wants to have as many options to expand their collection as possible and keep it Primaris, I would actually have to go with the Deathwatch box. Because you get a central character who is pretty decent in close combat, you have the Apothecary who buffs, covering one of your bases, the Aggressors who are very good at short range and close combat, and the 2 groups of Intercessors. Which, whilst you'll have to ditch the silver shoulder pads if you decide to make them, say, I don't know, Blood Angels or Salamanders, for example, you still have almost all your bases covered. Now, I'm sure GW has sold these boxes in a way that kind of encourages you to collect more than one. Because, for example, if I got the Deathwatch box and I had the cash left over, then I would probably consider getting the Blood Angel one. Because then I have a transport, I have 3 groups of Intercessors, a group of Incursors, 6 Aggressors, and I have an extra supporting character. Really, GW wants you to buy one of each, honestly. And at 85 quid a pop, you're going to end up spending £225 if you buy all 3, which would make GW extraordinarily happy. I can only imagine. So, is that good value for money for a starting army? As each box is going to be 25 power points, or 500 points if you're talking about matched play, then you end up with a grand total of a 75 power point army and a 1,500 point army for matched games. 225 quid for a matched game of a 1,500 point army. That's not too bad a saving, actually, considering that if you tried to buy all these things individually, then yeah, it would cost you quite a lot more. Of course, there are ways to have all these models at a cheaper rate. You can, of course, buy them on eBay, the Conquest magazine, which would definitely get you almost all the units featured in these boxes at a much cheaper rate. But of course, then you have to, wait for the magazines to turn up. But there are definitely ways you can do this box at a much cheaper rate. Just you're not going to get some of the special features. But the Librarian, the Aggressors, the Intercessors, Reavers, the Primaris Lieutenant, and the Apothecary, yeah, you can definitely pick those up in the Conquest magazine, no problem whatsoever, and frankly, it would be a hell of a lot cheaper. So yeah, my personal opinion, if you only buy one of these boxes, get the Deathwatch one, as I feel that covers more of your bases. But if you're thinking about getting 2, then I would choose probably the Blood Angel one, primarily for the Impulsor, because having a transport is always wonderful, and the support character in conjunction with your Deathwatch box in the form of the Librarian will be extraordinarily handy. Anyway, what do you guys think? Do you have a favourite out of these 3? Or have you bought any of them? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Take care, everyone.